Hello, this is Joe Savage from DevHQ.net, and today we're diving into our very first Lua tutorial. So the aim of this tutorial is we're going to get introduced to the language, and we're also going to set up our scripting environment. So if you kind of already know about the language and you kind of already know how to run and write code, then you might just want to skip over to the next tutorial where we actually start sort of writing code. But if not, this tutorial should be helpful for you because you're kind of going to figure out what the heck we're doing and how the heck we're planning to do it. So Lua is a powerful, fast, lightweight, embeddable scripting language, and it's using a bunch of stuff including Apache, World of Warcraft add-ons, Garry's Mod add-ons, and a game called Roblox. It's using a ton of stuff. And it's a scripting language, and this means it's interpreted and not compiled. So I don't know if you know what these terms mean, but some languages like C++, you write your code into a piece of software. That piece of software then compiles your code into something the computer can read, and then the computer then reads these instructions each time you run your program. But with stuff like Ruby and Lua, your computer kind of interprets your code each time it runs, and this is done by an interpreter. So it looks at your code, it figures out what it's doing, and it kind of does it in real time, which has its advantages. And one of these, which you might notice immediately, is that you can just kind of ping off the .lua files, which is just the file extension for Lua scripts, to your friends or colleagues or teammates on a project, and they should be able to look at your source code and interpret and run your file with relative ease, rather than needing sort of some clunky compiler and sort of all kinds of dependency trees and all these things, like you might do in something like C++ on a project. So there are a number of different methods you can use to write Lua code. The first is using what's called an integrated development environment, and this is essentially just the combination of a text editor and some way to run your code. So if you're using Windows, you might want to go to code.google.com/p/Lua for Windows, and this is just a nice bundle which includes the IDE Skite, so you can write and run your code on one package, and it's very, very easy to set up from this exe. And if you're using Linux or you're on the Mac, you may want to go to luabinaries.sourceforge.net/download.html to get your Lua installation kind of set up, and you just download the appropriate executable, put it in your bin folder, and you should be able to then sort of interpret Lua code from your terminal. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you may wish to just Google some instructions for your operating system, and that should be much clearer than my very, very brief explanation here. But basically, you just need something set up so you can write code and run code. In this series, I don't actually know what I'm going to be using to write and run my code. I might use my PC and use Skite. I might end up using this machine and writing and compiling, running my Lua code separately. I'm not really sure yet, but it doesn't really matter. As long as you have some way to write your code, some way to run your code, and you kind of know how your own setup works, then you should be good. So just to give kind of an overview of how that would work, if you have an IDE, you probably just want to whip it open, write some code. We don't really know how to do this yet, but we're going to learn about that in the next tutorial, and then you should be able to press a button labeled run or debug or something like that. It should look kind of like a play arrow, I'd imagine, and then that should sort of show the results for you. Or if you have this kind of separate setup going on like we do on this screen here, where you've sort of set up your own executables and stuff and you haven't kind of wired it up to a text editor like I'm sure you could, then you just write your code in text editor, you save it with the .lua extension, and then you go up into terminal or whatever, and you then use the interpreter executable you've downloaded to interpret the file you've written. Now, the idea is hopefully you should know how your own environment works, and I'm going to expect you to know how your own environment works for the next tutorial. So if you don't, do a bit of research, talk to people on forums or IRC chat rooms or whatever to just get a knowledge of your own environment, because you're going to need it. Because obviously, if people are rolling different environments, I can't give everyone sort of advice as we go. And that's really all I have to say on this tutorial. We're going to actually get to work coding in the next tutorial, which should be really good. If you want any more information or anything I've talked about in this tutorial, the links and everything are all in the related text tutorial. So if you're viewing on YouTube, that's just down below in the description. And if you're viewing on the website, the related text tutorial is just below where this video is embedded. So that's the end of this tutorial, and have a nice day.